Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for another installment of the Research Webinar Series hosted by our team here at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, or MVLRI. The goal of MVLRI is to expand Michigan's capacity to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. Just a disclaimer today before we begin. This webinar will be recorded and shared publicly. Consequently, anything shared during this webinar, including chat comments, could be shared publicly. This webinar may represent a presenter's or an attendee's personal views, opinions, conclusions, and other information which do not necessarily reflect those of MVU and/or the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, and are not given nor endorsed by MVU/MVLRI unless otherwise specified. Our topic today will be research partnerships, from planning to publishing, a research and review webinar, which has now been adapted for the MVLRI Research Webinar Series for providers and researchers. Presenting with us today are Teresa King, the Instructional Programs Manager at Florida Virtual School, and Jodi Marshall, the Executive Vice President for Business and School Solutions at Florida Virtual School. A little bit about our presenters. Teresa came to FLVS in 2006 as an English 3 teacher and quickly appreciated the ways in which a virtual environment removes barriers to success for all types of students. She went on to serve in instructional management and quality assurance positions at FLVS. Currently, Teresa is the Instructional Programs Manager for Florida Virtual School, a role in which she oversees instructional research initiatives and manages instructional policy and pilots. She holds an Ed.S. in Educational Leadership from the University of West Florida, an M.E.D. in Educational Leadership from the University of Florida, and a B.A. in English from the University of Florida. In 2002, Dr. Jodi Marshall saw how online courses provided opportunities to kids who needed access to curriculum that they could not get at their traditional schools. That began her journey into teaching online at FLVS, which led her to positions such as course development, literacy coach and manager, instructional leader, director of student learning, and chief academic officer. Recently, her role expanded to include business development, as she is currently serving as the Executive Vice President of Business and School Solutions. Jodi's publishing credits include several journal articles and 1 book. She holds an Ed.S. in Educational Leadership, a Ph.D. in Curriculum and Instruction, an M.A. in English Education, and a B.A. in English. With that, I will hand it over to our presenters, and first I believe Jodi will be talking. So Jodi, off to you.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Teresa and I really look forward to sharing what we do and learning from each of you as well. As Justin mentioned, we are both with Florida Virtual School. Teresa will be starting us off, and again, Teresa is our manager over research projects at Florida Virtual. Teresa.
Thank you, Jodi, and welcome everybody. And again, thank you for coming. We appreciate your interest and look forward to talking with you over the next few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. As the title indicated, we are going to talk a little bit about, for both providers and researchers, assuming we have a good mix of those folks in our audience, talk a little bit through some of the things that we've learned at FLVS and the partnerships with researchers that we've developed over the years. As a large virtual program, we get dozens of research requests of all different shapes and sizes every month. And so we've developed a lot of processes to deal with incoming requests and also to shape what we want our research initiatives to look like. And so just to get us started, as an institution, this first slide is really more geared toward providers and institutions, less so for researchers. So just from a provider perspective, this first slide is setting about to understand what you want and how to go about it. So these are kind of preliminary steps in the research partnership process that you as an institution want to take so that you know where you're headed. First thing on here is to go ahead and, as an organization, determine what your research questions are. That has a lot to do with goal setting. And ask yourselves, what questions can research answer for us? So this is setting you up to be more proactive in seeking out the researchers who focus in the areas in which you want to grow and learn. That hunt for organizational research questions needs to have, I would say, a cross-departmental focus. Seek input from all departments. Generally, as schools, we are going to be researching focused on instruction. I don't get a lot of research requests focused on our phenomenal HR department. They do great work, but it's not where a lot of the focus for our research heads, right? So is instruction going to be the focus? Even if it is, this is a cross-departmental search for what the organizational research questions are, because as we know, all of the departments work together to serve the best interests of the students in your institution. So really making sure that you all huddle up together to create these. As you're doing so, you want to keep an eye toward your mission and vision. When I put the bullet that says, to whom are you accountable, obviously this has a lot to do with your structure, maybe your funding structure, maybe your public or private status. But at the end of the day, to whom is your organization accountable? So does your board of trustees have certain goals or questions that they want to make sure that you as an organization are seeking to understand in the coming year? Does your state legislature have those same kinds of questions? So as you develop the things that you want to know, keep an eye toward the places that you're most accountable. Again, focused on goal setting, keeping the outcomes in mind. So even though you may be approached by researchers, even though there may be a lot of heads in the huddle with a lot of different perspectives from different departments, trying to keep focused on that central question of how will this help us achieve our goals. So setting those goals and knowing what you need to do in order to get to them, and the role in which research partnerships will play in the quest to achieve those goals for this year or for the next 5 years. That's the question that's going to help you from devolving into chaos with so many perspectives and ideas and opportunities. How will this help us achieve our goals? And then from there, once you feel like you have a good set of research questions that you are organizationally interested in, that's when you want to start on your process design. So you want to have documented steps for the research process. And those should be available across your organization, and to a certain extent, I would say, to the public. So that will really help facilitate when researchers are trying to find out more about your program and they maybe go to your website. What are the steps that prospective researchers should take? What is the contact information that prospective researchers can use to find out more about your organization, and what those organizational research questions are that you all just worked so hard to create? So that's kind of the background. I don't know if I'm talking too fast, but I'm going to keep moving. If y'all have any questions or anything as I'm talking, Jodi is manning the chat box and she's happy to chime in. And you can also, of course, if you, okay, thank you, Kevin. If you have any questions that you'd like to grab the mic, just let me know and I can stop. And then obviously there's going to be time for questions at the end. So this, from here on out, these next couple of slides will speak to both an institutional perspective, and what I try to do with this is add a researcher perspective. So in the initial phases of trying to develop a research partnership, these are the kinds of questions that you as an institution need to be asking, so that when you are moving forward with that partnership, you are ready and you've done your due diligence on this end. Again, the right-hand column addresses these things from a researcher perspective. So as an institution, you need to be asking yourself, what data can I provide, right? So to what extent can you go ahead and circle back and get historical data? How granular can you get in your data? Do you have to submit a request to your learning management system or to your student information system provider? how much data can you get? How much does it cost? How far back does it go? Can you dig down in that data and figure out, for gradebook data, do you have time on task data? Do you have, so just going to, yes, I sure will, IRB. Yes, if I don't, please remind me. And I think it'll be right around the same part, because the next part is FERPA. Making sure that you have an understanding of what you can provide is important. And on the other side, as a researcher, being very clear about having an understanding of what data you'll need. And then the second part of that top right-hand box, is my research design adaptable to provider capabilities? So this little dance, this data dance in the top row here, is very important to continuing the partnership from a very basic level. So this is the foundation that upon which the rest of this research is going to be built, right? So understanding what you as an institution can provide and talking through, we don't have this, but we do have that. And then as a researcher, being flexible to understand, all right, well, I can't get what I thought I could, but maybe if I change this a little bit, I can use what they do have. And it's not a stop sign, it's more of a yield. In addition to FERPA, are there statutory data security requirements in my state? This obviously varies state to state. Florida has some additional requirements. I'm sure other states do too, but I have not worked in them. So this is something that you need to research and take on and make sure that you are meeting the requirements that you need to. And then this other question, what can I do to ensure student privacy is protected? The researcher side of this, do I address student privacy concerns in my design? Am I relying on an assumption that the provider will understand how to remove PII? At some point, you do need to come together to understand where in the research design there are considerations made for personally identifying information. This sometimes, and I had a great prompt here, is addressed if you're working with a researcher affiliated with a university through their university's IRB process, right? So an IRB is not going to let human subjects research go through without the right kind of stopgaps in place to ensure privacy when it's necessary. So that's one place where that'll be addressed. At the same time, as an institution, you really do have the onus on student privacy and data security to make sure that what you're releasing is in line and is not going to violate FERPA or any additional statutory requirements that may exist. Do we have a documented, and I spoke to this a little bit earlier, a documented process in place to intake these requests? Who will shepherd projects through different departments internally? If you have to pull data as part of a research project that you're working on, is that in a different department? Is that in your IT department? Who in IT will be doing that? How will the person in IT know what the researcher needs? How will the person in HR, if they need teacher demographic data, get that data pulled, and how will they know what to do? There are a lot of different tentacles that can kind of start to grow, and understanding as an institution who and where those responsibilities who will hold those responsibilities and where they'll lie will save you a lot of problem on the back end. And then again, the researcher part, is there a proposal form or process? Do I have everything I need in place in order to complete that proposal process? In the intermediate phases, once you've sort of gotten all that groundwork laid, as you're working on data collection and then data analysis, as an institution, you can be asking yourself who will oversee data collection internally. So if you are working with researchers who want to send out surveys to teachers or students or parents, are those stakeholders going to receive that solicitation directly from an external researcher, or should they expect to get it from someone internal, and that lets them understand that the research has already been approved internally and they're okay to respond? Do you want to make sure that you don't have a bunch of external people soliciting your stakeholders for these kinds of purposes? If so, how many people in what capacity can you afford to spend time on this project? How will their time be used in relation to the project? How will the time that you spend on this project relate to a return on that investment? So those are all institutional considerations. As a researcher, what steps can the provider take to facilitate the data collection, and what can you do to ease the onus on the institution being researched? So making sure that, and I'm moving down to the second box too under researcher, I think these really go hand in hand. Making sure that your survey, if you're doing so, is applicable and relevant to the institution being researched. A lot of times if you are a researcher who is sending out a lot of different surveys to a lot of different types of providers, there's going to be some places where there's a disconnect in the survey questions. And if you're not able to adapt your instrument after data collection has begun with different institutions, you're not going to have very reliable results on that instrument if the questions don't apply to the school, right? So making sure that, again, being adaptable to fit the process, to make sure that you are working with the institution and being flexible as they're flexible to try to meet in the middle. And then, again, under institution, I didn't talk about the bottom left box yet, but again, the process for surveying, for introducing interventions to student or teacher populations, and who approves human study research internally. So the IRB step obviously is in place for your researchers that are affiliated with universities. Internally, what are the steps that you want to take as an institution to make sure that this human subjects research has been approved? So do you want to create an internal IRB or research committee? Florida Virtual School seats a research committee with committee members across all different departments, most of whom have strong research backgrounds and can evaluate incoming requests and give their feedback, and then the committee decision is sent to the researcher. Do you as an institution have a process in place that will ensure that any kind of surveys or interventions that want to be introduced to students or teachers, parents, any level of stakeholder in your institution, how is that human subjects research being approved internally? And then finally, as an institution, you want to be sure that at the beginning, at some point, you've got the right of review prior to any publication or presentation if it is going to include your name, if it's not. Everything needs to be kind of laid out very clearly ahead of time because nobody wants any surprises. As a researcher providing the draft for the institution's comment, again, this is another phase where for Florida Virtual School, our research committee comes back into play. Any kind of publication, whether it's at any level, comes back in and gets reviewed by either the entire committee in session or the entire committee out of session. It can go through an email and we don't have to meet. But at a certain point, institutional comment is made on the draft. And then following the documented procedure for draft review, will it be by committee in your institution? Will it be a committee of one? And then working with, as a researcher, the institution to incorporate your comments that you got and fix any factual errors related to the institution as needed. That's a big one. These are some challenges to be aware of and to try to, maybe if you can, kind of head off at the pass. For an institution, some challenges that can come up, of course, a lack of a designated process for research management. This will lead to confusion and inefficiency internally, where what you don't want is to have identified research goals, to have found willing and capable research partners who also want to work toward those same goals, and then to treat the ongoing project as though it were a research hot potato where nobody really owns that project and nobody has the capacity to shepherd that project through its many phases. So, you've gotten all dressed up, but you can't actually get to the prom at that point. Another institutional challenge happens when, without meaning to, an institution will overpromise, essentially. That has a lot to do, oftentimes, with data availability. if you are not sure what types of data you can provide, say you're not sure. Don't assume that your learning management system or student information system has the capability of providing certain data if you're not absolutely sure that it does. Additionally, if you contract out for student information services and learning management systems, there may be a cost associated with certain types of data retrieval, and you would want to know that ahead of time also. Other types of overpromising might include sample size or participation. There's, really kind of no way to guarantee sample size in a lot of different situations. And then moving down, still staying under institution, would be an insufficient understanding of student privacy requirements and data security procedures. That's a very, very big one. I get in a lot of trouble for that. Really want to make sure you are doing everything you need to related to student privacy and data security. If you do not maintain a secure file transfer protocol internally, make sure that the researchers that you're working with do, and that you can use it and it's compatible with your systems, because you don't want to have gone through all these steps to try to secure data and then send it in an insecure way. As a researcher, some of the challenges that you may face in partnering with institutions would be an inability to modify research design to create feasibility within the institution. I feel like I've touched on this a couple times, making sure that you're adaptable to the extent that is reasonable, to make sure that, again, no stop signs, only yield. And then as a researcher also, being uncertain or fluid with data requests is very challenging for a partner institution. I would say that one of the best things you can do in the initial stages, once everyone understands what types of data can be retrieved, is to just write it all out. Everything that you can get in writing, the better, so that both partners in this research project understand exactly what data is being sought. And once that's out there, the institution can work to retrieve it, and the researcher can know exactly what to expect to get. If you as a researcher initially request something and it's retrieved for you, and then you go back and request something else in addition to that, or something slightly different, all of those modifications and additions cost time and money for the institution. So understanding as you go in as a researcher, as much as you can, what your data pool is going to be. And then moving too far in the partnership before securing necessary funding. Again, if you are looking to secure a grant or mini grant or any kind of funding partnership with anyone outside the institution/researcher partnership, making sure that, as much as you can, you protect the institution from having to invest personnel, time and resources to the project before you know for sure that you're going to have the funding to move forward with it. That is actually the last slide that talks through some of the actual process and partnership guidelines, for lack of a better term. I'm going to transition now in this presentation to talking about some of the projects that Florida Virtual School specifically has been working on. So if anyone has any questions or comments about the section that I just finished, I'm happy to hear them now, or of course we can wait until the end. Okay, I'm going to forge ever onward. So at Florida Virtual School, like I said, we have engaged in many over the years, both large and small research partnerships. These are just two of the most recently completed that I've highlighted for you. A few months ago, we were able to finish up our existing relationship with SRI. They published 2 phases of online Algebra 1 research. The first phase was an online Algebra 1 course analysis using different providers, and it's exactly what it sounded like. It was literally just going through and analyzing what different providers' Algebra 1 online courses look like, more of a features analysis. And then phase 2, which to my knowledge has not been published, but I'm not absolutely sure, so I labeled it upcoming, is more of an outcomes analysis. And that across several different cooperating providers looked at outcomes associated with Online 1 Algebra 1 students. I think I just said something weird, but I think I said, okay. So the first phase is published on their website, and like I said, I'm not entirely sure that the second phase has been published at this point. Just a few short days ago, our partners at the Harvard PEPG, working with Brookings Institute, published their paper on Florida Virtual School specifically. They studied outcomes among students over several years of historical data, and that paper is available on their website. I think because this is PDF, I'm not sure that y'all can click on these URLs, but Google is your friend, and these are highly Googleable if you want to do so. Ongoing projects that are in progress right now, one of our partners is the Project for Educational Research That Scales at Stanford University. They are working in partnership with the Rakes Foundation and the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House to create the what they're calling the Growth Mindset Challenge. And we are excited to be partner providers in the Growth Mindset Challenge. It was a national RFP that was issued in early 2014 for researchers to submit proposals related to growth mindset and online learning. And those proposals were accepted in the summer of 2014. We went with, I think, 2 final different proposals from different research teams at 2 different universities. And data collection for round 1 began in July of 2014, and data collection for round 2 is scheduled to begin in February of 2015. This is randomized controlled testing to introduce growth mindset interventions to online students, specifically working with many of our math students to introduce interventions related to persistence and grit. Like I said, we're very excited about this research, and we're fortunate to be partnering. I am misusing the arrows. All right. Another project that is currently in progress is with the Center for Online Learning and Students with Disabilities. That center is a consortium of the partners that you see listed across the top of the screen. I won't go through all of those, but this is research into Florida Virtual Schools students with Florida Virtual Schools ESE students. This study will gain additional insight into the nature and accommodations strategies that special education personnel provide to students with disabilities and general education teachers in online courses provided by Florida Virtual's part-time program. Like I said, that data collection is currently in progress. They have so far completed, I think, several rounds of focus group research with some of our ESE specialists and teachers. And from there, they are actually going through some data associated with our ESE students. Another partnership that we are currently in progress on is with researchers from both Stanford and the University of Michigan. This is a large-scale, long-term project that will include many different types of research. It is digging into essentially online learning in the state of Florida as provided by Florida Virtual School. It will look at student outcomes and progress. It will, at some point during the scope of the project, include some student and teacher surveying. But this is a large-scale project that's currently ongoing, and I don't have an actual, okay, I'm just going to move on. We're also in partnership with professors from Harvard's Graduate School of Education. They are working on it's an established similarity intervention in that they have introduced it in traditional school settings several times now. Their work with Florida Virtual School represents the first time that they have adapted the intervention to be incorporated into online learning. So this is randomized control testing to introduce an established similarity intervention to online teachers and students. This is based on relationship building and the extent to which understanding and developing a relationship between a student and a teacher may lead to certain outcomes for the student. Florida Virtual School is also excited to be a core member of the REL Southeast. I'm sure many of us are aware of the great work that our RELs do throughout the country, and this has been a fruitful partnership for us, and we are excited to be core members of this alliance. This slide talks through, these are just some of the titles of some of the dissertations that have been published after some of our doctoral students' research proposals were accepted by our committee, and they went on to publish, these are just a few of the titles that have been published as part of our partnership working with doctoral students. That is actually it for me in the brief overview of some of the projects that we're currently partnering on. If you have any questions for me, I will let go of the mic and give some what I hope is adequate wait time.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I'll allow a couple more minutes here for questions if anyone would like to ask a question in the chat window for Teresa. Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to thank our presenters again so much for sharing their work with us today. Their efforts are greatly appreciated, and they are certainly helping to move the field forward. Of course, a big thank you to all of our participants for joining us here today as well. Oh, I see a couple questions in the chat window that I can let get resolved here. While those chats are taking place, I just did want to remind everyone of our next webinar in the series for next month. We just wanted to make you aware that our next webinar will be held on Wednesday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Leanna Archambault from Arizona State University and our own Catherine Kennedy from our team here at MVLRI will be talking about the new Journal of Online Learning Research published by the Association for the Advancement of Computing and Education. So please mark your calendars. Be sure to check your inbox for the registration invites as well. And lastly, in the meantime, if you're interested in keeping up with the latest on research efforts, webinars, presentations, or if you're interested in presenting your own research in our webinar series, please email us at mvlri@mivu.org. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Our handles and names can be found there as well. And just, again, be sure to keep up with the latest. We're very excited about this webinar series. We've had a great start thus far, and we think there's a lot more great stuff to come. With that, I'll go ahead and mute my microphone and allow a couple minutes here in the chat window before ending the session. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Hey there, Rob. I saw your question come in at if Florida Virtual School implements their own internal evaluation. We sure do. We do that, if not daily, then hourly. We are fortunate to have pretty robust internal data systems. Our own SIS that we developed in-house has historical data for many years. We're able to rely on that data literally on a constant basis to both evaluate and improve our own internal programs, and to, again, I touched on this earlier, we're able to rely on that data in the communications that we have with our stakeholders as well. So we have data analysts on staff, and we do have access to some pretty robust and granular data internally.